Hi, my name is Jessica Parrish, and today I'm going to be talking about the genus Caridina. Caridina is a fairly speciose group of small freshwater shrimps, often called dwarf shrimp, together with Neocaridina species. Caridina typically get only as big as an inch or an inch and a half, with only a few species getting to 2 inches in the larger specimens. These guys are really popular in the aquarium hobby. They breed really easy to tank. Pretty much you could do it at home. You're gonna find them even at Petco's, pretty much anywhere that sells aquarium supplies. You're going to find these guys, a couple of their relatives, and a few other shrimps, but these guys are the real big go-getters. So, being diverse and being so popular in the aquarium hobby, they have a lot of different colors because people like lots of different colors in their aquariums. So, even within one species, Caridina cantonensis, called bee shrimp, tiger shrimp, depending on the coloration. Um, Altogether, these guys are also called crystal shrimp, but none of these are really wrong. It's just dependent on what you're asking for, who you're talking to. So we'll see, we have a bunch of reds, and they don't show it as much here, but there are definitely wild type colorations that are just brown, and we'll get back to just brown and just red shrimp in a second. So here's a tree that I've seen on my own, just looking at research about what kind of shrimp to get for an aquarium, how to care for them in an aquarium. Most of them pretty similar, and a lot of them you can put in together. Caridina, we have two species, the crystal shrimp we saw before, and a mono shrimp that I mentioned briefly. Uh, doesn't the Amano doesn't typically get as many diverse colors, but they're typically kind of a brown, semi-translucent, some speckling. Right next to them, we have Neocaridina, the cherry shrimps. They're also really popular. They are roughly the exact same size as the crystal shrimp and can also have a fairly wide variety of color morphs. The most common is the red, and they generally stay with solid colors, but they can be green and blue and yellow. And then further along, we have bamboo shrimp and ghost shrimp. Ghost shrimp look a lot like a mono, but they're slightly more transparent. The bamboo shrimp and ghost shrimp, not going to see at a Petco usually. Typically, I have to go and get them online. But these are all very popular aquarium species. So, coming back to, they can be the same colors. These are both red shrimp. However, these are different, not only different species, but different genus of animals. So using color and size to tell them apart is pretty unreliable. You would probably be hard pressed to be able to just look at a fish in an aquarium or look at a shrimp in an aquarium and be able to tell them one species or another unless you had a way to magnify them. You can tell them apart a little bit in the difference in the setae of the maxillipeds, but for the most part, you're really relying on the person you're getting the shrimp from, that they are knowledgeable in the animal that they have. So I have two hypotheses that I want to test about the Caridina genus. I want to propose that they are a monophyletic group. Second hypothesis is that Caridina is most closely related to Neocaridina. Similar size, similar colors, so on and so forth. So here is some bootstrapping I did looking at the nucleotides. I grabbed the CO1 of different Caridina species and a few Attia species I have in blue, the Caridina I have in orange, and then the cherries I have are red. There really was just nucleotides for the two. However, Neocaridina diffidi is typically considered a subspecies of Denticulata, so I have them labeled as synonymous, so it makes sense for that node to have 100% likelihood. And here is the parsimony. We have very similar numbers, strengths. And here I want to point out that there is the Amano shrimp has kind of broken away from the rest of the Caridina species here in my bootstrapping. However, that node's pretty weak the further down in the the diagram that I have here. And the strongest nodes are the ones, the Neocaridina obviously, and the ones holding the rest of the Caridina species together. The small Caridina. The Amano shrimp that's all the way down there with a tiger prawn is the little bit larger. So coming back to my first hypothesis, Caridina is a monophyletic group, and I want to, after doing some more research and reading, reject this hypothesis. I looked at my own bootstrapping, I looked at several other papers, and this figure displays it fairly well. Tried not to make it too crazy. I highlighted in red where the Neocaridina species are, and they're really nestled in there within the Caridina species. We have them above them, we have them below them, along with some Parisia species and a few other species. So it would not be accurate to call them a monophyletic group. Hypothesis 2. Caridina is most closely related to Neocaridina species. This hypothesis was partially supported by my bootstrapping. It had Neocaridina within Caridina. However, Caridina was kind of broken up by the tiger prawn and a few Attia species. But research papers I've read have not had that issue. They had they have more species in their charts or more individuals in their bootstrapping. So they have suggested that Neocaridina is the closest relative to the Caridina species. So going further to do more research on this, new species are still being discovered in 2020, and I'm sure to this day, mostly because they can be so difficult to tell apart that a lot of the times in the past, when they're first described, they might be described as the same species, or there's just so many species that they hybridize, make a new species. And then to get kind of, if we want to get more of a consensus for the phylogenetic tree of shrimps, there definitely needs to be more nucleotide mapping of Neocaridina species. There are more than 2 species of Neocaridina, I promise. They're just not uh, out there to the point that they are having their nucleotides mapped yet, and if that could happen, then we could kind of get a bigger idea of how the relatedness of these shrimps are with one another. And I think that would be really cool because shrimps are really cool. And yeah, well, thank you.